actually, this is the burning issue of our times, isn't it? But we're going to have a much sober debate. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but let's have it at it. Let me begin with you, Gurcharan Das, and I'll dive right in. India is in a precarious situation because we're kind of doing okay. We're kind of okay as far as the heat from US tariffs, reciprocal tariffs is concerned. But, you know, we are not the major player in the market, so we have to be very wary of the headwinds that come our way because of others that are getting affected, namely US and China. So US increased its tariff in a fit to 104% on China. Just yesterday, China has increased its tariffs on US goods to 84% now. Are we all going to burn in this fire, which is primarily between US and China? That's the big question.
Well, first, I would say that India is in a relatively better position because we are not an exporting country. Now, that's not something to be proud of, but in this circumstance, it means that the impact will be relatively modest. And secondly, in the products that we sell to America, the tariffs on our competitors are higher than they are to us, so we have that particular advantage. Where we are going to get hurt is because the global economy is weakening as we speak, moving to a recession, and it will and that recession in the world will hurt us.
But so, actually, Gurcharan Das, interesting you talked about a global economy. Many believe the global economy is dead. There is nothing called globalism going forward.
Well, I wouldn't say quite that. But I would say that this is also an opportunity for India. If we play our cards well, this may be the opportunity to really become an exporting country, which is to say that the reality today is partly why we are not an exporting country is because our tariffs are too high. And therefore, you know, we have not been able to join the global supply chains. And as a result of that, we have, frankly, and you know, the main issue for India, there's only one big issue for India, and that is jobs. Right. Half of India's population is still on the farm. Mm-hmm. And the farms only need those, and that's a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And they have no future of rising. We're talking about India rising. Mm. They have no future. So the only way that this can be done will be through creating a larger manufacturing base. Mm. You know, every country that rose up, I mean, since 1991, India has grown at 6.35%. Now, this is very good for democracy. We have lifted 450 million people out of poverty. The middle class has grown from 10% to 30%. Now, this is all very good.
But we have to do so much more.
We have not created an industrial revolution.
Yes, and that has been a pain point for quite some time. We've been hearing about it for the last 15, 20 years at least. But Deepanshu, sticking to the tariffs, I want to press on this question with you. Is the global economy, the way it used to function, dead? Is that order dead? What is going to come after this if this is what is going to happen?
Okay, thank you for having me here. Much more civic in terms of what I was listening in the last two sessions. So it's a very critical point in economic history and political history for nations. There are turning points in history for every century. This is precisely one of them. So a lot of things would look clearer 6 months, a year down the line. Where I think India is in a relatively better position is that it started aligning with other regional groups much earlier in the conversation. I think thanks to a little bit of foresighted thinking by the current administration, at least on projection purposes. So one good example is what India's been doing in BIMSTEC, within conversations as part of BRICS. it's trying as much as possible to be part of regional groupings where they have strategic interests.
Is that the way to go? Regional more than global?
Absolutely, because in the rise of multipolarity, there are multiple poles of strategic alignment. And you have regional competitive advantages. Where I think India has been affected economically is that it's been very vulnerable on a few sectors, which I am sort of worried, which is agriculture, sectors like dairy, poultry, which will be big contesting points in its FTA conversations with the US. That's under a sort of discussion point. It's been a larger trade issue for many developing countries.
Yes.
And I think because we have lesser leverage given what the US is doing, you would find these sectors to be very critical in the way how India positions itself.
Okay.
As of right now, if you really look at the information out, we don't really have a very clear, cohesive trade policy vision. And I'm using the word trade policy because it's different from broader foreign policy. There are strategic, military interests, where you have a clear understanding who your principal trade partners are, not by the data, but by the vision of your alignment. And India has right now an FTA negotiation even with the EU. I think the diversion of the trade conflict from what you're going to see between the US and China will have ramifications on India as well. And I think it is there where there is a case for a better alignment of India's partnership within the Asian continent and in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, you know, of course, a lot of people are also suggesting, why don't India and China get together better and kind of ride this out? But we all know the problems we have, the geosecurity issues, the national strategic issues that we have. So if I have time, I'll try and touch on that. But PK Basu, I want to ask you this. Donald Trump is saying countries are coming to him and begging him. Should India also join that queue, or should we stand our ground? What is the best way to negotiate with Donald Trump?
Well, let's get away from some of the rhetoric and the sort of abuse of Trump that is now sort of the global consensus. Donald Trump has been very clear, since 1988 at least, that America is being taken for a ride. I think in 1988 he was perhaps a little bit ahead of his time. But the simple fact is that what America faces and the world faces is one economy, China, that is not a market-based economy. And I have been saying this for 25 years, and I'm glad that Donald Trump now also says something similar in roundabout ways. But the simple fact is this. So if you look at China, in the year 2000, I'll just start with steel. Steel is a very basic thing that is produced all over the world. In the year 2000, world steel production was 840 million tons, of which China produced 128 million. And it was already the largest amount of steel produced by any country in history. By 2007, that went to 400 million tons for China. And at that year, in March 2007, 18 years ago, Wen Jiabao, the premier of China, used the 4 uns, that the economy is unstable, uncoordinated, and unsustainable, etc. So he was referring to overcapacity in China then. Guess what? Steel production in China in the year 2020 reached 1,065 million tons. Way more, 200 million tons more than the whole world was producing in the year 2000. So now, this is just one. But if you look at automobiles, semiconductors, solar panels, everything, China produces way more than the rest of the world combined. Is this because China is very competitive? No. It is because China does not respond to market signals. It just keeps... No, this is the same thing as the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union had too much steel capacity, it built up massive inventories. When China has too much steel capacity, it exports it to the world at below the cost of production, which is called dumping.
Yes.
Now, that is defined as dumping, okay? So, what we have now is a situation where the US is dealing with China. Now, thank goodness, Trump is dealing with China on our behalf. We should all have been doing this.
We should be thanking him.
We should have been doing this 20 years ago.
So
now,
don't curse Trump.
Okay, now let me
Trump.
let me just complete this.
Yeah, the
complete point is that most of the rest of the world is negotiating. We have already started negotiating with the US long before April 2nd. We've been negotiating, and we are going to negotiate a mutual reduction in tariff. Once there's a mutual reduction in tariff, there will be no question of a global recession. But global trade will be very disrupted because at the moment, a lot of what is called these global supply chains, they're all centered around China. They used to be centered around ASEAN before the 98 Asian crisis.
So
they are now centered around China.
If I get you correctly, you're saying this is an opportunity for the rest of the Asian
So the
bloc.
simple fact is, for India, the opportunity is this. The opportunity is that most of our competitors are now paying more. So let's just look at Vietnam and Bangladesh. They were paying 0 tariffs in the US for textiles and garments. They will now pay 37% for Bangladesh and 46% for Vietnam. We lost our GSP benefits in the US market in June 2017. Trump took them away. But he didn't take them away from Bangladesh and Vietnam. So now we have a huge advantage. Now, Gurcharan correctly pointed out that labor-intensive manufacturing is the one area where we've completely missed the boat. We've missed the boat. We find every opportunity once a decade to miss the boat there. This time we have a real opportunity to do that well. Now, I also saw. Yeah.
Minute each to both of our guests. They've raised their fingers. Yes.
Yeah.
So I would just say, let's think of this moment as another 1991 moment for India. Trump could be our best friend because ultimately, and PK has shown the way, that really it is only through labor-intensive manufacturing via the global brands, because we forget Indian market is actually relatively small, and we need the best story for India today is Apple, the iPhone. If we just duplicate the iPhone model to all the labor-intensive sectors, and it can be done, but it means work. Forget the work of reforms but you know, when the Prime Minister of Vietnam heard that India had got the iPhone, he flew to Cupertino, California to talk to the head of Apple, and he said, now we have lost the iPhone, give us the tablet, give us the iPad. And he got it. Now, every chief minister in India has to behave in that way. And it can be done.
So opportunity, but it needs to be grabbed. And as you were saying, gentlemen, that we have missed those opportunities in the past. Deepanshu, very quickly, I have a final round of questions.
But one thing we have to be clear. We have 10 years of data of the current government and what it has done. My problem is a lot of this has been said year after year. They've had a number of opportunities. What you would find it difficult to understand is the issue around precursor to labor-intensive manufacturing is human capital development. And if you see year after year, the natural weightage of budgetary allocations towards areas of human capital development has repeatedly been falling. Now, where you would find India to become ready is investing in a medium to long-term vision, which I feel is more or less lacking. And I think unless and until, because we're talking about rising Bharat, if you don't have a long-term vision to become another Vietnam, or to become another Bangladesh, or to become another, South Korea, the evidence right now is we're falling more in a Latin American trap of high debt, government putting a lot of money, private sector not investing enough, consumption demand weakening, and you have a situation where you're sort of battling for yourself. So we have to be very clear that what is our vision, not just in policy, but in action. And I think I am not convinced by looking at the last few years that we're able to do it. We started doing it in 2014. The first 2 years of FDI data is very promising, even for private investment. But America is facing its demonetization moment now, like we did in 2016.
Okay.
So you have a big issue with the intent being there to do the right thing.
But
But
not
the
really
way
the
this is
action
being
on
done
ground.
is going to erode a lot of good faith.
Let me ask a couple of rapid fire. P.K. Vasu.
But can I just respond to this?
Okay, go ahead.
You see, the basic thing that most people don't understand is that we lament the fact that private investment hasn't really picked up in India.
In India, yeah.
Private investment has been stagnant pretty much around the world for 25 years because of China. You look at the level of investment spending in the United States today compared to 25 years ago. The CAGR is less than 3%. You look at Korea, CAGR growth, compound annual growth rate for private investment spending in Korea is less than 1%. So Indonesia, Jokowi was president for 10 years. And during that time, he came in saying, I want 7% growth. What did he achieve? Less than 5%. Why? Because he couldn't get investment spending going. This is not specific to us. In fact, we are the second fastest growing in terms of investment.
He doesn't agree with
Second
you.
point is, it's completely, this is data. Now, the final point I'll make, one more, is that, we often say that we haven't industrialized. We missed the industrial revolution. Not true. India is the second biggest producer of steel, aluminium, cement in the world. We're the fourth biggest producer of cars in the world. Electronics and labor-intensive manufacturing are the two areas where we failed. Electronics is picking up. If you look at electronics, they're now about 10% of our merchandise exports. This year, they've grown about 40%. They've continued to grow strongly for the last 5 years. So we're beginning to see a pickup there.
Okay.
But there's a lot of
I'll take
space to grow.
precursors from previous panels. If the
Textiles and
government has
garments.
to do its bidding, let the government do its bidding. I mean, you have to look at the facts. Indonesia has done remarkably well in drawing private capital formation. India has not invested enough in human capital development. There have been studies last 3 decades of higher functional illiteracy. You have more enrollment in schools, colleges, but you have a situation of higher youth unemployment than ever before.
Okay.
And this is something we have to be very practical about.
Okay, I have a rapid fire question set for you. So, Gurcharan, very quickly, please add to this, then I'll go to my rapid fire. You wanted to add to this?
Well, all I want to say is, let's not worry about why we failed so far to become a manufacturing powerhouse, why we seem to have skipped from a green revolution, making agriculture a surplus sector, to a leader in the IT economy. What now is a golden moment, because with the tariffs against China being so high, every multinational company is scared. And China plus one, which we have not been able to harvest that strategy, this is almost like waiting, a fruit that's almost falling on the ground that we should grab.
But we said that after COVID too.
Yes, that's exactly my point, sir. We have been saying this year after year. I've been part of so many budgetary discussions as well. This is your 91 moment. This is an intellectual bankruptcy, because I've been part of those conversations back and
I
forth.
disagree with what he's saying.
And I think this has to be put in
I think we have on my left
I didn't know this
a
was going to
Senate.
be so heated.
Sorry.
Okay, one by one.
No, so let me just point out. Our public debt as a percent of GDP is coming down. Our external debt as a percent of GDP was 24% in 2014. It's now 17%.
82%.
It's coming
Where is
down.
it coming down?
24% to 17%. Per external
The
debt
IMF
GDP.
has just warned us.
So
Have you looked at the report of the IMF, which has just warned that your government debt to GDP is going over 80%, which is a red marker? I've been studying financial crisis
in the United
for
States,
15 years.
what it is in Indonesia, or what it is in Korea.
India is
So
not
what are you talking
Indonesia.
about?
India is not
Okay.
Indonesia.
So
I
the
think
point is,
two different.
the point I just like to make on industrial.
Very quickly.
So let us just look at steel, for instance, right? I started with steel. Steel production in China and the world has been declining for the last 3 years. The only one of the top 10 steel producing countries in the world that has seen an increase in steel production is India. It's gone from 100 million tons in 2020 to 149 million tons last year.
Let me say there is a silver lining.
India's deindustrializing. It is industrializing and growing
Separate
rapidly.
the macro questions from the sectoral
the question
questions.
of industry.
If you want to talk about sectors, I mean, we can talk the whole day.
So
The macro picture has to be put in perspective.
The macro picture is really
I have
good.
to intervene, running out of time. So, silver lining to the dark cloud. And of course, we can look at it as half glass full or half glass empty. But I do want to fire 2-3 rapid questions very, very quickly. PK Basu, I'll start with them. Because I asked you the question about Trump. Friend or foe? Donald Trump.
Friend.
Deepanshu? Donald Trump, friend or foe?
Yeah. Friend, yeah.
Well, the same here. Grab the opportunity. This is the moment.
Is he a friend
Go
to us
for
or a
it.
foe to us?
Well, thanks to him, China's tariffs are 100 and whatever you said.
Yeah.
And thanks to him, we have every multinational now wants to leave China, and this is the time to grab the opportunity.
Okay, next question then. Tariff war, in the larger scheme of things, good or bad for world economy?
Obviously bad for the world economy short term.
In the long term?
Good for US manufacturing strength in the medium term, and hence good for a broad-based industrial recovery in the US, which is good for the world.
Deepanshu, same question.
I just said, I mean, in the long term, we're all dead. That's what Keynes said. You have to be very honest.
Okay.
It is bad because, as I said, this is America's demonetization moment.
Okay.
We can capitalize, but we are not showing
Rapid
any
fire,
promise.
rapid fire. Good or bad? Tariff wars.
It is very bad for the world economy.
Okay.
It's also very bad for the United States. So this, I mean, there was a reasonably good order. And what we needed was to reinforce and return to a multilateral system.
Okay, but at the same time, you all agree this is an opportunity for India, right?
No,
yes,
yeah.
yes, and yes.
I
want
If I
to...
could just say one last thing.
I do
Very
accept
quick.
this cynic here.
Most people are now saying that China is about to take over the world. You know, if you must understand the Chinese economy is a colonial economy. Even China still has 40% of its population living in rural areas.
Yeah.
They provide the cheap labor that drives China's economy. So 10% of China, which is the Communist Party membership, benefits, and the rest are slaves.
Okay,
so
we can discuss Chinese
we
system
don't want to be
versus
part of
our
China.
system
Separate
till the
discussion on
cows
China.
come
We
home.
need
That's
a
a separate
separate
discussion. But I did want to end on a nice, slightly better note. The RBI has cut rates today, so consumers are a little happy. We don't know what the markets will do, how they'll behave, but generally speaking, India not
But
as
you
bad
have to
as
see
the
whether
rest.
it is passed on by the banks to the consumers.
Sure enough,
Just
sure
because
enough.
RBI has cut rates doesn't mean
Sure
banks-
enough, the government does need some sentiment boost. And let's hope that at least as far as India is concerned, it's going to be in a better stead than the rest of the world. I do have to thank our guests for joining us. Pleasure talking to all of you. And thanks a lot for making this heated. Thank you. A big round of applause, please. Thank you, everyone, for our esteemed guests. 3 economists never agreeing on anything. That's a good sign.